It all began on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday morning when I, John, nearly met my fate on the staircase, a moment that would forever change how I viewed my own body. My legs, once steadfast and reliable, betrayed me as I climbed down to grade the morning paper. One misstep, just one, and I found myself clinging desperately to the railing, my heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. That fleeting second felt like an eternity, a cruel reminder of how fragile independence can be for someone my age. One wrong step, I thought with chilling clarity, and everything could vanish. When I finally steadied myself, shaking from both fear and adrenaline, I turned to see my wife, Margaret, standing at the bottom of the stairs, her face pale, eyes wide with terror. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Her expression spoke volumes about the toll my weakening legs had taken not just on me, but on our lives together. Every shuffle across the room, every labored climb up the steps, it was all etched into her worried gaze. The realization hit me hard. This wasn't just my struggle anymore, it was hers too. That day marked a turning point. What if I hadn't caught myself? Would I have ended up bedridden, dependent on others for even the simplest tasks? The mere thought sent shivers down my spine. Aging is inevitable, yes, but losing control over something as fundamental as walking? That felt unbearable. I knew then that I couldn't let my legs dictate the rest of my life. This was more than physical health. It was survival, dignity, freedom. If I wanted to keep living, being not just existing, I needed to fight back. But where do you even start when your own body feels like it's working against you? As John continued his journey towards stronger legs, he couldn't help but reflect on the biological realities of aging that were affecting not just him, but those around him as well. One day, while visiting his neighbor Mary, a lively woman in her late 60s who always had a smile for everyone, he witnessed something that shook him to his core. Mary was trying to lift her giggling grandson into her arms, but her legs buckled under the strain. She stumbled backward, catching herself against the couch just in time. The room fell silent except for the child's confused laughter. "I'm fine," she said quickly, brushing off the moment with a nervous laugh. But John could see the shame and frustration flickering in her eyes. It wasn't just about dropping the baby. It was the realization that her body, once so capable and strong, was betraying her. This incident haunted John long after he left Mary's house. He began researching more about why this happened, diving deep into the science behind muscle loss. What he discovered chilled him. After 60, we lose muscle maybe at an alarming rate. Alarming wasn't even the right word. It felt like a ticking time bomb. Every year that passed without intervention meant weaker muscles, less stability, and greater vulnerability. And then there was the story of Mr. Thompson next door, whose life changed forever after a simple slip on wet pavement. One misstep, a fraction of a second, and he fractured his hip. The doctors warned him that recovery would take months if it happened at all. For John, these stories weren't just anecdotes. They were warnings etched into his mind. They painted a grim picture of what awaited anyone who neglected their leg health. The connection between Mary's struggle and Mr. Thompson's accident became painfully clear. Both stemmed from the same root causes: sarcopenia, the gradual decline of muscle mass, and osteoporosis, the weakening of bones that made them brittle and prone to fractures. John realized how interconnected these issues were. Without strong muscles to support movement or dense bones to withstand impact. Even minor accidents could become life-altering events. He imagined himself in Mr. M. Thompson's shoes, or rather in his hospital bed, and shuddered at the thought. Would he end up unable to walk, dependent on others for basic tasks, or worse, confined to a wheelchair, watching life pass by through a window? But what struck John most deeply was the emotional toll these physical changes took. Mary didn't just feel physically weak. She felt diminished as a person. Her inability to hold her grandchild gnawed at her pride and sense of purpose. Similarly, Mr. Thompson's fall robbed him of his independence, leaving him isolated and despondent. These weren't just medical conditions. They were personal tragedies that stripped away dignity and joy. John knew then that maintaining leg strength wasn't just about avoiding injury, it was about preserving identity, relationships, and the freedom to live fully. As he processed all of this, John remembered Margaret's worried face when he nearly fell down the stairs weeks earlier. Was she seeing the same fears play out in their neighbors' lives? Were they silently dreading the future too? Determination surged within him. If biology worked against them, then they had to fight back harder. With each new piece of information, John grew more resolved to defy the odds, not just for himself, but for everyone facing the same battle. Because now, more than ever, he understood that every step mattered, not just for mobility, but for survival. As John delved deeper into understanding the biological factors behind leg weakness, he began to realize that nutrition was not just a piece of the puzzle, it was the cornerstone of maintaining strong and healthy legs. This revelation hit home when his friend Edward shared some alarming news. After a routine checkup, Edward discovered he had dangerously low levels of vitamin D. I never thought I'd be one of those people who ended up in the hospital because of something as simple as missing nutrients, Edward confessed, his voice trembling with frustration. His doctor warned him that without intervention, his bones could become so brittle they might fracture with minimal impact. A chilling prospect for someone who cherished independence. Edward's diagnosis wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a growing trend among older adults struggling with nutritional deficiencies. What made matters worse was the skyrocketing cost of nutrient-rich foods. John remembered overhearing conversations at the local grocery store, seniors whispering about how they couldn't afford salmon or fortified milk anymore. Prices had risen sharply over the past year, leaving many unable to access the very foods their bodies desperately needed. It felt like a cruel twist of fate. Just as their bodies demanded more care, the resources to provide it slipped further out of reach. The situation took a darker turn when John learned about a recent spike in hospital admissions among elderly residents in their community. Many were suffering from severe malnutrition, which led to muscle wasting, bone fractures, and even immobility. Margaret showed him an article in the local paper highlighting this crisis. "It's heartbreaking," she said softly, her eyes scanning the page. "These aren't just statistics. They're our neighbors." The story described Mrs. Anderson, a widow who lived 2 blocks away, collapsing while trying to carry groceries. She hadn't been eating properly for months, relying on cheap processed meals instead of fresh produce due to budget constraints. Now she lay bedridden, her legs too weak to support her weight. For John, these stories weren't abstract. They were personal. He thought back to Mary's struggle to lift her grandson and Mr. Thompson's fractured hip. How much of their suffering could have been prevented with better nutrition? The connection between food and health suddenly seemed glaringly obvious, yet tragically overlooked. Determined to avoid becoming another statistic, John vowed to prioritize essential foods known to boost leg strength. Calcium-rich options like yogurt and leafy greens became staples in his diet, despite the pinch they put on his wallet. Protein sources such as eggs and beans found their way onto his plate daily, fueling his muscles and giving him hope. And though vitamin D supplements came with a hefty price tag, he knew skipping them wasn't an option, not if he wanted to stay active and independent. But John also understood that knowledge alone wasn't enough. Action required resilience, creativity, and sometimes sacrifice. For instance, when the cost of fresh fish became prohibitive, he started experimenting with plant-based alternatives like tofu and chickpeas, both rich in protein and affordable. On days when even basic groceries felt unattainable, he reminded himself of Edward's plight and the countless others enduring similar hardships. These reminders fueled his determination. Every meal became an act of defiance against the odds stacked against aging bodies. Every bite represented a small victory in the fight to preserve mobility and dignity. As John reflected on his journey, he realized that nutrition wasn't just about feeding the body. It was about reclaiming control over life itself. Each nutrient-dense choice was a step toward freedom, resilience, and vitality. But more than anything, it was a testament to the power of intentionality. In a world where aging often felt like losing ground, John chose to stand firm, one nourishing meal at a time. Just as John began to embrace the importance of exercise in maintaining leg strength, life threw an unexpected curveball that tested his resolve. The pandemic struck, and with it came a wave of restrictions that disrupted daily routines for everyone, including Mrs. Smith, a lively woman who led the local senior fitness group. For years, her outdoor exercise sessions had been a lifeline for dozens of older adults, offering not just physical activity, but also a sense of community and purpose. But when social distancing measures forced the group to disband indefinitely, the impact was devastating. "It's like they took away a part of me," Mrs. Smith confessed during one of their virtual check-ins, her voice trembling with emotion. For John, this news hit close to home. He had grown fond of attending these sessions, where he found camaraderie and motivation. Now without them, he felt adrift, like a ship lost at sea without direction. The absence of structured exercise left him grappling with feelings of despair, especially as he noticed his legs becoming weaker by the day. Simple tasks that once required minimal effort, like climbing stairs or standing up from a chair, now seemed insurmountable. Each attempt filled him with frustration and dread, as though his body was betraying him all over again. Adding insult to injury, the weather turned unseasonably harsh. Rain poured relentlessly, followed by biting winds that made stepping outside unbearable. Even on days when John summoned the courage to brave the elements, the slick sidewalks and icy patches posed a constant threat of falls. "What's the point?" he muttered bitterly one afternoon, staring out at the gray sky through his window. The combination of isolation, deteriorating strength, and unpredictable conditions created a perfect storm of hopelessness. It wasn't just about missing exercise, it was about losing access to the very thing keeping him grounded. But even in the darkest moments, resilience flickered within him. Inspired by Edward's nutritional journey and Mary's determination despite setbacks, John resolved to adapt. If he couldn't go outside, he'd bring the workout indoors. Armed with nothing more than a sturdy chair and some resistance bands, He crafted a makeshift routine tailored to his needs. Every squat, every stretch became a battle cry, a declaration that he wouldn't let circumstances dictate his fate. Yet progress was slow, and the emotional toll lingered. Some nights he lay awake wondering if he'd ever regain what he'd lost. Would he be able to hike those trails again? Could he keep up with Margaret on their evening walks? Despite these doubts, small victories began to emerge. One morning, after weeks of consistent effort, John managed to stand from his chair without using his hands for support. Tears welled up in his eyes, not because it was easy, but because it wasn't. That single act symbolized something greater. Defiance against despair, proof that persistence could still yield results. Encouraged, he started experimenting with indoor alternatives like yoga videos and seated exercises, which helped maintain flexibility despite the confinement. Though far from ideal, these adaptations kept him tethered to his goal, reminding him that even under dire circumstances, movement remained possible. As John reflected on this chapter of his journey, he realized how interconnected challenges were. From Edward's vitamin D deficiency to Mrs. Smith's disbanded group, each story underscored the fragility of independence and the power of adaptation. Life may have thrown obstacles in his path, but giving up was no longer an option. With every rep, every mindful breath, he reclaimed control, not just over his legs, but over his spirit. And though the road ahead remained uncertain, one truth stood firm. Resilience wasn't about avoiding hardship, it was about rising above it. As John continued his journey towards stronger legs, he couldn't help but notice how deeply intertwined physical health was with mental well-being, a truth that hit painfully close to home when his longtime neighbor, Mr. Johnson, fell into a deep depression after retiring. For decades, Mr. Johnson had been the life of their small community, always ready with a joke, a helping hand, or an invitation for coffee on his porch. But retirement seemed to strip him of purpose overnight. His once lively eyes grew dull, and the energetic man who used to walk miles every morning now barely left his recliner. "I feel like I've been erased," he confided in John one gloomy afternoon, his voice heavy with despair. The weight of isolation pressed down on him so fiercely that even simple tasks like preparing meals or taking short walks felt insurmountable. John watched as Mr. Johnson's decline spiraled further during the pandemic, a time when social isolation became a grim reality for countless seniors. With lockdowns in place, neighbors who once gathered at a park or shared stories over tea found themselves trapped within four walls, cut off from the connections that gave their lives meaning. Mrs. Anderson, the widow 2 blocks away, stopped answering her door entirely. Even Mary, who struggled with leg weakness, admitted she missed the laughter and camaraderie of her weekly book club more than anything else. It was as though the world had dimmed, leaving many older adults adrift in silence and sorrow. This collective sense of loss reinforced something John had read recently. A stressed mind can destroy every effort to care for your body. He realized now just how true this was. Despite all his hard work strengthening his legs through diet and exercise, he knew it wouldn't matter if his spirit remained broken. A tense, anxious mind could sabotage even the best laid plans for recovery. For Mr. Johnson, the absence of meaningful engagement wasn't just emotional, it physically manifested in his deteriorating strength. Each day spent sitting idle sapped his energy, tightened his joints, and weakened his resolve. Determined not to let negativity consume him, John embraced mindfulness practices with newfound urgency. Meditation sessions became his sanctuary, offering moments of clarity amidst chaos. Deep breathing exercises help calm the anxiety creeping into his thoughts about aging and vulnerability. On especially tough days, he reminded himself of Edward's triumph over vitamin D deficiency and Margaret's unwavering support despite challenges. These reflections fueled his determination to stay mentally resilient while nurturing his body. Yet what struck John most profoundly was the realization that no one should face these battles alone. Social connection wasn't merely a luxury, it was a lifeline. Inspired by this insight, he began organizing virtual meetups for neighbors like Mr. Johnson, creating spaces where they could share stories, laugh, and encourage each other. Though far from perfect, these gatherings brought flickers of joy back into their lives. Slowly but surely, John saw hope return, not just in himself, but in those around him. In a world shadowed by uncertainty, fostering mental wellness proved to be the cornerstone of enduring vitality. As John continued to embrace new tools for maintaining his leg strength, he couldn't ignore the growing role of technology in modern health management. One afternoon, while visiting Mrs. Brown, a neighbor known for her sharp wit and love of gardening, he witnessed firsthand how overwhelming this digital shift could be. She had just purchased a sleek fitness tracker after hearing rave reviews about its ability to monitor steps, heart rate, and even sleep patterns. But instead of feeling empowered, she sat at her kitchen table staring blankly at the device, panic etched across her face. "I don't even know where to start," she admitted, her voice trembling with frustration. The small screen seemed alien, the buttons unintuitive, and the instructions dense with jargon that might as well have been written in another language. John realized then that Mrs. Brown wasn't alone. Many seniors felt similarly adrift when confronted with these high-tech gadgets. For people like Mr. Johnson, who already struggled with feelings of isolation, the added complexity only deepened his sense of disconnection. "It's like they're designing these things for someone else entirely," he once muttered bitterly during one of their conversations. And it wasn't just usability, it was cost. Devices marketed as essential often came with price tags that made them inaccessible for retirees living on fixed incomes. Even Edward, who meticulously tracked his vitamin D intake, confessed he couldn't justify spending hundreds of dollars on something so intimidating. Despite these challenges, John saw an opportunity. If older adults could overcome the initial learning curve, technology held immense potential to transform their lives. He remembered Margaret showing him how to use a simple step-counting app on his phone. It became a game changer, motivating him to move more each day. Inspired by this memory, he offered to help Mrs. Brown navigate her new gadget. Together, they broke down the process into manageable steps, turning it on, syncing it to her phone, setting achievable goals. Each small victory brought a spark back into her eyes, reminding him that patience and persistence could bridge generational gaps. However, the broader issue remained daunting. How many others were left behind because they lacked support or resources? John thought of Mary, whose leg weakness kept her from attending community events where tech tutorials were occasionally offered, or Mrs. Anderson, too proud to admit she didn't understand her smartwatch. These stories underscored a harsh reality. While technology promised empowerment, it also risked alienating those who needed it most. It was a paradox, one that demanded compassion, adaptability, and perhaps advocacy for more inclusive design. As John delved deeper into understanding the role of nutrition in maintaining strong legs, he encountered yet another daunting challenge, one that struck close to home when his neighbor, Mr. William, shared a harrowing experience. Eager to boost his leg strength after months of struggling with fatigue and weakness, Mr. William had decided to take matters into his own hands by purchasing a popular supplement online. It promised miracles, he recounted bitterly, holding up an almost empty bottle of pills. But instead of feeling revitalized, he began experiencing severe side effects, nausea, dizziness, and even muscle cramps worse than before. The realization hit hard. Not all supplements were created equal, and trusting the wrong product could do more harm than good. This incident sent ripples of concern through their small community. Stories like Mr. Williams weren't isolated, they were alarmingly common. With so many products flooding the market, distinguishing between quality supplements and subpar imitations felt nearly impossible. John remembered browsing shelves at the local pharmacy, overwhelmed by flashy labels promising everything from supercharged energy to bone-strengthening magic. Behind those glossy promises lay uncertainty. Were these products backed by science or just clever marketing? Even Edward, who had painstakingly researched his vitamin D deficiency, admitted how exhausting it was to sift through conflicting reviews and vague ingredient lists. The situation grew direr as news spread about counterfeit supplements making their way onto store shelves. Some contained harmful fillers, while others lacked the active ingredients they claimed to have. For seniors on fixed incomes, this added layer of risk made the process of finding safe options feel like navigating a minefield. How are we supposed to trust anything? Margaret lamented during one of their evening walks. Her frustration echoed the collective sentiment of fear and helplessness among their peers. Determined not to fall victim to the same pitfalls, John resolved to approach supplementation cautiously. He reached out to healthcare professionals for guidance, learning that personalized recommendations were key. Calcium, vitamin D, and omega-3 fatty acids emerged as potential allies, but only under professional supervision. Still, the journey wasn't easy. Every purchase required thorough research. Every label demanded scrutiny. Yet, John found solace in knowing that careful consideration could protect him from dangerous missteps. Reflecting on Mr. Williams' ordeal, John realized the importance of patience and diligence. In a world where quick fixes often overshadow sound advice, safeguarding health meant resisting the allure of empty promises. This lesson became a turning point, not just for John, but for everyone around him. Together, they vowed to prioritize safety over speed, ensuring that their pursuit of stronger legs remained grounded in wisdom rather than desperation. As John continued to piece together the puzzle of maintaining strong legs, he came face to face with the truth that shook him to his core. Health is not just physical, it's a delicate balance of body, mind, and spirit. This realization hit painfully close to home when he learned about the Harrisons, a family whose relationships crumbled because they ignored one crucial aspect of well-being: mental health. Harrison had always been the caretaker, ensuring her husband ate nutritious meals and exercised regularly. But no one paid attention to her growing anxiety and feelings of isolation. When she finally broke down, unable to manage both her emotional struggles and household responsibilities, the entire family fell apart. The once harmonious household became a battleground of blame and resentment, a stark reminder that neglecting even one dimension of health could unravel everything. This tragedy resonated deeply with John as he reflected on his own journey. He thought back to Mr. Johnson's descent into depression after retirement and how easily it could have spiraled further if left unaddressed. It dawned on him that just one overlooked aspect can destroy all our efforts. For instance, Edward diligently managed his vitamin D deficiency, but often skipped social interactions, leaving him vulnerable to loneliness. Similarly, Mary worked tirelessly to strengthen her legs, but sometimes pushed herself too hard without listening to her body's needs, leading to setbacks. These stories painted a grim picture. Many seniors were failing in their attempts to maintain healthy habits because they didn't adopt a holistic approach. They focused narrowly on exercise or nutrition while ignoring hydration, mindfulness, or community engagement. John realized that success required more than discipline. It demanded intentionality across every facet of life. He started incorporating mindful practices like meditation to ease stress, recognizing how tension could sabotage his progress. At the same time, he encouraged Margaret to join him for daily walks, turning physical activity into an opportunity for connection. Together, they began setting realistic goals, not just for leg strength, but for overall vitality. Each small victory, whether completing a yoga session or cooking a nutrient-rich meal, felt monumental because it honored their commitment to comprehensive wellness. Despite these strides, challenges remained. Many neighbors struggled to sustain new routines, falling prey to old habits when motivation waned. Some abandoned their fitness trackers after initial excitement wore off. Others stopped attending virtual exercise classes due to technical difficulties or lack of support. These failures underscored the fragility of change unless nurtured by consistent effort and mutual encouragement. Yet, amidst this turbulence, John clung to hope. If families like the Harrisons could rebuild trust by addressing neglected areas, then anyone could rise above setbacks. After all, true resilience lay not in perfection, but in persistence, a lesson John vowed to carry forward. As John reflected on the lessons he'd learned about leg health, he couldn't help but think of Mrs. Thompson, whose story had become a poignant reminder of the challenges many face in prioritizing their well-being. Struggling with mounting medical bills after a recent hospital visit, she found herself at a crossroads. Invest in physical therapy and nutritional supplements to strengthen her legs or cut costs to ease financial strain. It feels like choosing between today's health and tomorrow's security, she confessed, tears brimming in her eyes. The weight of this decision hung over her like a storm cloud, threatening to derail her progress before it even began. Adding to her burden was the pressure from friends and family who dismissed her efforts to adopt healthier habits. "You're too old to change now," some would say, while others question the value of spending time on exercise when rest is what you really need. These words stung deeply, planting seeds of doubt that made maintaining motivation feel nearly impossible. Even John could see how such negativity created an invisible barrier. A barrier, one that required immense resilience to overcome. Yet, despite these obstacles, Mrs. Thompson resolved not to give up. Inspired by stories like Edward's perseverance and Mary's determination, she reminded herself that small, consistent actions could lead to lasting change. She started setting micro goals, like walking 5 extra steps each day, and celebrated every achievement, no matter how minor. Though the journey remained fraught with challenges, she clung to hope, knowing that persistence was her greatest ally. Her struggle underscored a universal truth. Building healthier habits isn't just about willpower. It's about fighting against societal pressures, financial constraints, and self-doubt. For John, Mrs. Thompson's courage became a rallying cry, a call to action for everyone to prioritize their health, defy skepticism, and embrace the incremental victories that pave the way to vitality.